Eurípedes Barsanulfo. Note: the exact meaning of the expression, doctrine, in Brazil, does not have the same meaning in regions such as the United States and Europe. In Brazil, doctrine has the following meaning: set of principles that serve as the basis of a system, which can be literary, philosophical, political, and religious. Born on May 1, 1880, in the small town of Sacramento, state of Minas Gerais, and disincarnated in the same town, at the age of 38, on November 1, 1918. Early on, a deep intelligence and sense of responsibility manifested itself in him, an Aquas naturally conquered in the experiences of previous lives. He was still young, but very studious and inclined to teach, so he was commissioned by his master to teach his own classmates. A respectable political representative of his community, he became secretary of the Brotherhood of St. Vincent de Paul, and participated actively in the founding of the newspaper Gazeta de Sacramento and the Liceo Sacramentano. He soon found himself elevated to the natural position of leader, for his sure orientation as to the true values of life. Through information provided by one of his uncles, he became aware of the existence of spirits phenomena and of the works of the Spiritism codification. Facing the facts, he turned his activities totally to the new doctrine, researching and ways, until his doubts were completely dispelled. Awakened and convinced, he converted without delay and without weakening, identifying himself fully with the new ideals. In a sincere attitude typical of his personality, he sought out the vicar of the parish church where he collaborated, making available to him the position of secretary of the Brotherhood. This event resonated loudly among the townspeople and members of his own family. Within days, he began to suffer the consequences of his misunderstood attitude. He continued to teach and included the teaching of spiritualism among the subjects, provoking a reaction from many townspeople, and was sought out by the parents of the students, who even offered him money to cancel the new subject, and in the face of his refusal, the students were removed one by one. Under all kinds of pressure and merciless persecution, Eurípedes suffered a severe trauma, withdrawing for treatment and recovery in a neighboring town, at which time several mediumistic faculties blossomed in him, especially healing, awakening him to the missionary life. One of the first cases of healing occurred precisely with his own mother, who, recovered, became a valuable assistant in his works. The production of several phenomena attracted hundreds of people from other places to Sacramento, taking shelter in hotels and boarding houses, and even in family homes, because Barsanulfo attended to everyone and no one left without some benefit, at least the soothing of faith and renewed hope and, when deserved, the benefit of healing through kind spiritual benefactors. He helped everyone, without distinction of class, creed, or color, and wherever his presence was needed, he was there, whether there were material conditions or not. He was never discouraged and, humbly, followed his path full of difficulties, but animated by the most alive idealism. Soon he felt the need to divulge the Spiritism, increasing the number of its followers. For that he founded the Esperança e Caridade Spiritism group in 1905, a task in which he was supported by his brothers and some friends, developing interesting works, both in the doctrinaire field and in social assistance activities. On one occasion he fell into a trance among the students, during a class. Coming to his senses, he described the meeting that had taken place in Versailles, France, just after World War I, giving the names of the participants and the exact time of the meeting when the famous treaty was signed. On April 1, 1907, he founded the Allan Kardec School, which became a true landmark in the field of education. This teaching institute became known throughout Brazil, having functioned uninterruptedly since its inauguration, with an average of 100 to 200 students, until October 18, when it was forced to close its doors for some time, due to the great epidemic of Spanish flu that ravaged our country. His work became so well known that, when registrations were opened, they closed the same day. Such was the demand for students, forcing a school in the same region, run by nuns of the Order of St. Francis, to close its activities for lack of students. The Spiritism movement in the region was led with a strong hand, with a secure directive, and this fact greatly bothered the Catholic clergy, which, initially in a veiled way, and soon afterwards, openly, developed a defamatory campaign involving the worthy missionary and the doctrine of liberation, which was gallantly defended by Eurípedes, through the columns of the newspaper Alavanca, discoursing mainly on the theme, "God is not Jesus and Jesus is not God," with renowned and incontestable argumentation. determining rigorous defeat of his opponents who, in the face of a giant who knew no fading in the fight, ordered from Campinas, the Reverend Feliciano Yeag, famous for his preaching and knowledge, convinced that with their arguments and convictions they would strike the final blow to Spiritism. It was thus that the priest challenged Euripides to a polemic in the public square, accepted and agreed upon terms that were respected by the well-known apostle of good. On the appointed day, the priest began his remarks, insulting spiritualism and spiritualists, the doctrine of the devil and its adherents, madmen liable to eternal punishment, in a demonstration of false religious zeal, thus giving public testimony of hatred, showing his soul full of intolerance and sectarianism. The crowd, which was respectful and confident of the spiritualism defenders' retort, foresaw the defeat of the offenders, due to the fragility of their empty and inconsistent arguments. The sublime missionary serenely waited for his opportunity, beginning his part with a sincere, humble, and beautiful prayer, imploring peace and tranquility for some and light for others, making the environment propitious for inspiration and assistance from the higher plan, and then began to defend the principles on which his teachings were based. With delicacy, with logic, giving vent to his intelligence, he unveiled the doctrinal distortions proclaimed by the Reverend, reducing him to the insignificance of his meager knowledge, corroborated by the cheerful and noisy manifestation of the crowd that, from the beginning, trusted the one who easily demonstrated the logic of the teachings proclaimed by the Spiritism. When the famous polemic was over, and recognizing the Reverend's state of mind, Euripides approached him and embraced him fraternally and sincerely, as sincere were his thoughts and attitudes. Barsanulfo followed with dedication the maxims of Jesus Christ until the last instant of his earthly life, on the dreadful flu epidemic that ravaged the world in 1918, taking lives, spreading tears and affliction, redoubling the work of the great missionary, who had foreseen it long before it invaded the American continent, always speaking of the gravity of the situation that it would bring. Manifested on our continent, she came to find him at the bedside of his sick, helping hundreds of poor families. He had reached the end of his earthly mission. Exhausted by the effort spent, he passed away on November 1, 1918, at 6 p.m., surrounded by relatives, friends, and disciples. Sacramento in wait, in true pilgrimage, accompanied his material body to the grave, feeling that he was resurrecting to a higher and more sublime life. Source: Grandes Voltos do Espiritismo. Great spiritualist figures.